So this is a series that has been hiding for quite a while. It's been 12 years since we last had a main series Ace Combat game, and in that time only really Hawks has tried to replace it. First thing that really stands out is that everything in this game has been done in the name of fun gameplay. That sounds like a positive, but it has a bit more of a neutral tone to it once we get into it. Most notably, what has been sacrificed is the length and depth of the story. Early on, we have a game that meshes story and gameplay exceedingly well, with major events feeling natural and completely within gameplay. It's about 2/3 through that things start to feel rushed and we start dodging potential deeper themes. There are quite a few moments where you seriously start questioning if you're the good guy in this game, as you start being involved with some very morally grey shit and some outright unethical moves. There are a lot of places later in the story where people should be getting tried and found very guilty of some serious shit. What feels really unnatural is how strong the storytelling within levels is, but once outside of it, it is much less so. We start getting what feels like time jumps in between the last handful of missions, where we go from being mortal enemies with some parties to somewhat comfortable allies very quickly. Once we get to the final 3 missions, suddenly a lot of plot threads get tied up very quickly or just outright abandoned. And with the person that ultimately felt like the villain just disappearing, main characters getting written out very quickly, and an ending that is most definitely not how a war would actually end in this circumstance, this game does feel a little rushed towards the end. The early parts of the story play really well and are signs of something much greater, but once we start dodging side plots and things start being rushed, it falls apart in the later third. But back to that morally grey stuff. Overall, there are some really intriguing ideas played with, and what unfolds in the skies is great. Sadly, it just feels cut short. We go from moments where you have allies that are clearly given other orders, and generally speaking, very unethical orders, to what has to be classified as outright murder, and one moment where it definitely feels like we're stormtroopers massacring Ewoks. Onto the gameplay, and this is where the game shines. Visually everything is fine, and is a definite current gen entry into the series, and personally I love the soundtrack. But what really shines is the level design and the difficulty curve, which is spot on. Honestly, the only ones that got on my nerves were the escort missions, and even those were pretty well fine once I had a handle on what the mechanics were trying to do. The underlying theme here is that each level has a different and generally quite interesting mechanic that it's trying to use. Sometimes this is brought on by the map design itself, sometimes it's something extra. There is a good example about halfway in. There is a mission where you have to take out radar towers on top of a mountain range, with valleys in between the mountains. If you fly above the top of the mountains, you start getting locked onto by some satellite system, the idea of which is that it's going to kill you. So ultimately, you end up in a mission where you are stalking in the valleys waiting to jump up, blow away a radar tower, and maybe some anti-air stuff if you feel like it, and dive back down below the mountaintops. This is basically the aerial version of Jaws. Because very few of these are repeated outside of the mission that they are introduced in, we end up in a game that continues to feel fresh as every one of the 20 levels feels unique. The downside is that it feels short, and with no sign of a level editor or challenge missions so far, we have no way of experiencing some of the more unique combinations of these mechanics. We have another level where there's an ongoing dust storm on the ground, but you have a lot of ground targets that you have to kill. So it makes the game essentially play out that you have to fly into the dust storm and be limited to extremely low visibility to complete the mission. Now, how this would have tied up with some alternatives instead of just unable to fight back ground units, I don't know. We never get to try that. After a run of 15 missions of generally unique gameplay though, we hit 3 levels of essentially boss fight, which is used to wrap up the main plots going up to this point. Personally, the first of these 3 felt a bit anticlimactic, as it was against an enemy that you'd been hyped up for basically the entire duration of the game to this point, and then they drop out of the sky with no real effort. The second and the third were quite satisfying though. Overall, I think this was an excellent return for the Ace Combat series. Sadly, the developer's goal to avoid padding the length has, in my opinion at least, damaged the story and missed the chance to combine and revisit some level types. Personally, I'm hoping that the DLC fleshes out some of what was missed in the story, and it's a real pity that we miss the idea of some deeper ideas and really exploring whether or not we may very well have been considered the bad guy in this scenario. Also, I really feel like a level editor would go a long way, with the ability to create custom levels out of the different mechanics we experience and the different enemy types that we experience throughout the game. But regardless, I'm looking forward to whatever comes next for the series.